The plane was almost full when Jaden stepped on board. He clutched his small backpack tightly, the straps digging into his shoulders. He wore a red hoodie, slightly too big, and held a worn notebook in his hand. His sneakers squeaked softly as he walked down the narrow aisle, looking for seat 18A. Jaden was only 10 years old, and this was his first flight alone. His mother had kissed him goodbye at the airport and told him to be brave. She said, "You're strong, Jay. I'll be waiting when you land. You got this." He found his seat by the window and climbed in quietly. He didn't bother anyone. He didn't even look around much. He simply opened his notebook and began to draw. Little stars, ships, and robots dancing on the paper. Then she came. A tall woman, dressed in an expensive white coat and carrying a designer handbag, stopped at the row. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Jaden. She paused, her lips pressing into a thin line. She looked at the empty seat beside him, seat 18B, and then at him again. Slowly, stiffly, she sat down. Jaden didn't say a word. He slid closer to the window, giving her more space. His pencil stopped moving, though. A few moments later, the woman reached up and pressed the call button above her head. A soft chime rang, and a young flight attendant appeared. Beside row 18. She smiled politely, unaware of the tension bubbling under the surface. "Yes, Mom. How can I help you?" the flight attendant asked. The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice, but not enough. Jaden could still hear her. "I don't feel safe sitting next to him," she said, nodding slightly toward the boy. "Can I be moved?" The words dropped like stones in a still pond. The flight attendant blinked. "I'm sorry. I paid for a peaceful flight," the woman continued, "and I'd rather sit somewhere else." Jaden didn't say anything. He stared out the window, pretending he hadn't heard. But inside, his stomach sank. He gripped his pencil harder. The attendant's smile faded. She looked at Jaden, really looked. A small, quiet boy. Neat, silent, drawing in a notebook. "Ma'am," the attendant said carefully, "this young man is a paid passenger. He has every right to be here. I'm afraid the flight is full. There are no empty seats available." The woman gave a tight, fake laugh. "So you're saying I have to sit here?" The attendant nodded. "Yes, Mom." The woman let out a sigh, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Unbelievable. She crossed her arms and turned away. The flight attendant gave Jaden a kind smile before walking off. But the damage was done. People nearby had heard everything. Whispers began, soft and uncertain at first. Did she really say that? Poor kid. What's wrong with her? An older man across the aisle narrowed his eyes. He looked at Jaden, then at the woman. He shook his head, slowly. Jaden kept his head down, pretending to draw, but his hands trembled. The woman pulled out her phone and typed something angrily, her fingers stabbing the screen. She wasn't whispering anymore. "It's ridiculous," she said out loud. "Can't even choose who to sit next to on a flight these days." A teenage girl 2 rows ahead turned around. She caught Jaden's eye and gave him a small wave. He didn't wave back, but his lips twitched, almost a smile. Then something strange happened. The older man across the aisle leaned over to speak. "You know," he said to the woman, "I flew this same airline back in 1963. She ignored him. He didn't stop. "Back then, people like him weren't even allowed to sit beside people like you, not by law. But we changed that. Some of us bled for it. Some died." The woman froze. Slowly, she turned her head toward him. "I'm just saying," the man added, "it's a shame to see how far we've come, just for some to want to go back." Silence followed. Jaden glanced up, just for a second, meeting the man's eyes. The man nodded once, firm and kind. The flight attendants moved through the aisles, continuing the boarding process. One of them, a woman with silver hair and tired eyes, paused beside Jaden. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked quietly. Jaden nodded. His voice barely came out. "Yes, Mom." She knelt beside him for a moment, eye level. "You know," she whispered, "you remind me of someone. A long time ago. Someone brave." Jaden looked confused but said nothing. The woman stood, gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze, and walked away. By the time the plane took off, the story had already started to spread. A young man in row 21 had recorded part of the conversation on his phone. He shared it on social media with the caption, "Lady on my flight refuses to sit next to a black kid." Crew handled it like legends. Within minutes, it began gaining likes and comments. Back on the plane, the tension hadn't left, but something else was growing. Awareness. Passengers were checking their phones. A few stared at the woman in white. She noticed. Her jaw tightened. Jaden leaned back in his seat, eyes closed, pretending to sleep. But his mind was racing. He missed his mom. He remembered her words at the airport. "People might treat you unfairly sometimes, Jay, but you don't let them shrink you. You're not small. You're strong." He didn't feel strong right now. He felt invisible. And yet, somehow, like the entire world was staring at him. The plane flew over clouds, smooth and silent. Inside, the whispers continued. An off-duty pilot, sitting in first class, received a quiet message from the head attendant. "He's on this flight." The pilot asked, surprised. The attendant nodded. "Does he know?" "No," she replied. "His family wanted it kept quiet." The pilot looked thoughtful. Then he stood up and made his way to the back of the plane. He stopped at row 18. He looked at Jaden for a long moment. Jaden blinked. "Sir." The man gave a soft smile. "Don't mind me, son. Just checking in." He turned to the rude woman. "And you, ma'am. Everything okay?" She frowned. "Are you with the crew?" "I'm with the airline," he said vaguely. "We're watching today's flight very closely." She gave him a confused look. He gave Jaden a little nod, then returned to first class. As the flight continued, more and more people began to check their phones. The post about Jaden was spreading fast. Comments poured in. "This breaks my heart. That kid looks so sweet. Shame on that woman. Good on the crew for standing up for him." Someone even found an old article about a civil rights hero with the same last name as Jaden. David Montgomery, a man who once led a famous protest in the 1970s, a man who disappeared from the public eye, but was never forgotten. The passengers didn't know yet, but a connection was forming between a young boy drawing in a notebook and a legacy bigger than he ever imagined. And far below, in a city waiting for his arrival, his mother got a phone call she never expected. The sky outside the plane was painted in streaks of gold and soft gray. Passengers were settling in, but something hung in the air, like a string pulled too tight. Jaden sat quietly in his seat, still drawing. The lines on the paper were sharper now, faster. He wasn't drawing spaceships anymore. He was sketching a woman's face, her frown twisted and eyes cold. Then, beside her, a soft outline of an older man with kind eyes. Across the aisle, the man who had spoken earlier, Mr. Rowland, watched him, silent. The whispers in the cabin hadn't stopped. More passengers were now aware of what had happened. And the post on social media. It had crossed 50,000 views already, but none of them knew the whole story. Not yet. In the crew's private area, at the back of the plane, in the small space where the crew stored snacks and supplies, two attendants stood close together, whispering. "That's definitely him," one of them said, a young woman with nervous hands. "Did you see the notebook?" The older attendant with silver hair nodded. "Yes. He draws like David did. Same eyes, same hands. It's eerie." "Do you think he knows?" "No." His mother wanted him raised quietly, away from the spotlight. "What about the captain?" The older woman hesitated. "I already told him. He remembers David. Everyone at HQ does. They still talk about how he saved that bus of kids back in the 70s. The younger woman's voice dropped to a hush. But that wasn't supposed to be public knowledge, right? No, the older one said. Serious now. And that's why we need to keep this flight calm. No more scenes. No more whispers. That boy, he doesn't know who his grandfather really was. Jaden's memories. Jaden didn't know much about his grandfather. All he remembered were old photos. A man with a firm gaze and hands scared by time. His mom said he was strong but silent. Jaden never understood why his grandfather never spoke in the videos, only smiled. He was quiet because he'd already said enough to the world. His mom once told him, "Your grandpa made history, but not for fame, for justice." Jaden had heard those words, but they didn't mean much to a 10-year-old. Until now. Now something was shifting. An unexpected voice. Halfway through the flight, a soft chime rang again. But this time, it wasn't a complaint. It was an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Jaden's eyes lifted. So did everyone else's. "We want to thank you for flying with us today. We'd also like to say that this flight carries a very special young passenger, someone connected to a powerful piece of our nation's history." The passengers leaned in. The woman in white sat stiff as a statue. The captain continued, his voice steady and proud. "In seat 18A is a young boy whose grandfather stood against hatred during a time when doing so was dangerous. He helped change laws. He protected lives. And his legacy lives on in his grandson, Jaden Montgomery." Silence. Then, clapping. It started softly, just a few people, then more. Row by row, people applauded, not loud and wild, but respectful, powerful. Jaden's eyes went wide. The woman in white looked like she wanted to disappear. The flight attendant with silver hair returned and bent beside him. "Sorry we didn't ask you first, sweetheart, but the captain felt it was time. You deserve to know." Jaden's mouth opened, but no words came out. "He wasn't just a hero, Jaden. Your grandfather, he saved lives. He spoke out when the world wanted him quiet. And now people need to see that spirit still exists." Back on the ground. The flight had a little over an hour left. But far below, in the airport terminal, something was changing too. A group of reporters had already gathered. Word had spread. A Montgomery was flying in. Not a famous politician. Not a celebrity. A child. But one connected to a legacy people hadn't forgotten. And somewhere among them stood a woman with tears in her eyes. Jaden's mom. She'd seen the post online. She saw the captain's words quoted. She saw the comments, the likes, the shares. And she realized her son's quiet heart had just awakened something loud in the world. Back in the air, Jaden was still trying to understand everything. He looked down at the notebook in his lap. His pencil moved slowly now. He drew a man. Tall, with eyes like his, a beard. And behind him, people marching, holding hands, not shouting, but standing. He didn't know how he knew, but somehow he drew it right. Mr. Rowland leaned in from across the aisle. "Your grandfather once stood in front of an angry crowd and didn't flinch," he said softly. "I was there. He looked them in the eye and said, 'We are not afraid. We are not done.'" Jaden blinked. "He'd be proud of you today," Mr. Rowland added. For the first time, Jaden smiled. Not a small twitch, but a real full smile. The wheels touched down on the runway with a soft thud, and the plane slowed gently, the engines humming low like a quiet breath after holding in so much tension. Jaden's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't said much since the captain's announcement. He just sat there, feeling a strange mix of pride, confusion, and nervousness all fighting inside him. He was only 10, but somehow it felt like the whole world had just noticed him. As the passengers unbuckled and began standing, The older flight attendant bent down again beside him. Jaden, there's going to be a few people waiting at the gate. Like my mom? He asked softly. Yes, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes fully. And some others. Just stay close to me, all right? Jaden nodded and held his drawing notebook close to his chest. The terminal. Outside the gate, the airport was unusually loud. Reporters with cameras, curious onlookers, airport staff standing awkwardly by, trying to maintain some order. And in the middle of it all stood Jaden's mother, Tasha. She wore a blue jacket and a worried expression, her eyes darting between every door, every face. A security guard came up to her quietly. Ma'am, I know this is overwhelming, but we've assigned 2 escorts to walk with you and your son to help keep things calm. Why are they even here? She asked, clearly tense. He's just a child. The guard gave a tight-lipped nod. Yes, Mom. But he's also a Montgomery. And the internet, well, it doesn't wait for permission. Back on the plane, Jaden stepped into the aisle, the older attendant gently guiding him by the shoulder. Passengers made space for him. Some smiled kindly. Others simply watched, uncertain. The woman in white was gone already. She'd rushed off the plane the moment the seatbelt sign turned off, her face red with something between shame and anger. Jaden didn't miss her. As they reached the front of the cabin, the captain himself stood waiting. Tall, with gray around the edges of his face, he knelt down slightly to meet Jaden's eyes. You don't know me, he said gently, but I knew your grandfather. He was the bravest man I ever met. You carry his eyes, Jaden. Be proud of that. Jaden nodded, the words sticking in his throat. The crew opened the door. And the moment Jaden stepped out, flashbulbs, cheers, a wall of sound. Cameras flashed like starlight. People clapped. A few even shouted his name. The crowd didn't come close, but the energy hit like a wave. Jaden froze for a moment. Then he saw her, his mom. Tasha ran forward, pushing gently past reporters, and dropped to her knees as she wrapped him in a tight hug. Oh, baby, she whispered. I saw the video. I saw everything. You were so strong. Jaden clung to her. And for a moment, none of the noise mattered. A brief interview. One journalist stepped closer, voice soft and respectful. Ma'am, just a few words. How does it feel knowing your son has become a symbol of something so powerful? Tasha didn't let go of Jaden as she answered. He's just a boy, she said. A good, kind boy. That should have been enough. It should always be enough. Her voice cracked a little. But if people need to remember his grandfather's name just to listen to my son's voice, then so be it. The haters don't stay silent. As Jaden and Tasha were escorted out a side entrance, a man in a dark jacket shouted something from the crowd. Keep your politics out of planes. This is just a PR stunt. The guards turned toward him, but Tasha didn't flinch. She looked him straight in the eye. This wasn't about politics, she said. It was about respect. Jaden looked at the man too, but not with hate. Just calm. Quiet strength. And maybe that's what made the man stop yelling. The ride home. Inside the car, Tasha held Jaden's hand the whole time. He looked out the window, still thinking. Mom, he asked quietly. Yes, baby. What did Grandpa really do? She was silent for a long time. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph, black and white. A young man standing between 2 burning cars, holding a wounded child. That day, she said, he didn't run. Everyone else did, but he didn't. Jaden stared at the picture. Why didn't he? Because people mattered to him more than fear. Jaden was quiet. Then he whispered, I think I'd want to be like that. That night, the world watches. By nightfall, Jaden's story had gone viral. News channels picked it up. Schools shared it in classrooms. A few politicians tweeted about legacy and bravery. But for Jaden, It wasn't about any of that. It was about the look in his mother's eyes. It was about the man in the photo. It was about the voice in his own heart whispering, "Stand up. Stay kind. Speak softly, but never stay silent." The next morning, Jaden woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing over and over. He wasn't even allowed to have social media yet, but that didn't stop the world from talking about him. People were posting pictures of him stepping off the plane. Some called him a hero. Some shared his drawings that had been found in the seat pocket and uploaded by a kind passenger. But not all the voices were kind. Some called it a setup. Some said the story was fake. And others just didn't want to believe a 10-year-old black boy could be brave, kind, and calm under pressure. Jaden didn't understand all the words, but he felt their weight. And when he looked into his mother's eyes, he saw something new there. Fear, but not of danger. Fear of what comes when truth meets hate. The principal's call. At noon, Jaden's mom got a call from his school. "Miss Montgomery, we need to speak about Jaden's return to class," the voice said. "There's been some tension." Tasha's voice sharpened. Tension. He didn't even do anything wrong. "I understand," the principal replied. "But some parents are saying their children feel uncomfortable with the attention Jaden is getting. There's been talk of disruptions." Tasha gripped the phone tighter. "You mean to tell me, because he was mistreated, and now people are supporting him, that's causing disruption?" The line was silent for a beat. "I'm just asking that we all remain calm," the principal said. "There's a school board meeting tonight. You're welcome to attend." The meeting room. That evening, the school cafeteria was filled with adults. Some wore suits. Others held signs. A few reporters stood at the back with cameras ready. Jaden sat beside his mother, his hand in hers. At the front of the room, the school board sat at a long table, looking tired and uncomfortable. The principal stood and spoke. "We're here tonight to address community concerns about recent events, including media attention surrounding one of our students, Jaden Montgomery." A few people clapped. Some didn't. Then came the voices. The angry father. A man stood up first. "My son came home asking if he was a bad person because he's white." The man shouted, "This whole thing is making kids feel guilty for things they didn't do." Murmurs spread. Another woman stood up. "This boy was made into a symbol. What message are we sending?" Tasha rose slowly from her chair. Her voice didn't shake. "My son didn't ask for any of this," she said. "He didn't choose to be treated like a threat on a plane. He didn't ask to be famous. He just wanted to visit his mom." She looked at the man. "And maybe your son feels uncomfortable because, for once, he's being asked to look at someone else's pain." The room went still. A voice from the past. At the back, an older woman in a gray sweater raised her hand. No one recognized her. "I knew Jaden's grandfather," she said. "We were teachers together in Alabama during the protests." People turned to listen. "I watched that man walk a bleeding student out of a classroom during a bomb threat. I saw him stand in front of angry mobs. He was a good man. And if Jaden's anything like him, we should be proud, not scared." Jaden blinked. He didn't even know her name. But somehow her words made him feel taller. "Jaden speaks." The room went quiet again. Then, slowly, Jaden stood up. He didn't have a speech, just feelings. "I didn't want anyone to clap for me," he said softly. "I just didn't want people to be scared of me. I like to draw. I like spaceships. I miss my grandpa, even though I never met him. That's all." He looked down at his shoes, then back up. "And I think everyone should be able to sit on a plane without being told they're scary. Even kids." A ripple through the crowd. For a long time, no one moved. Then a teacher in the back clapped. Then another. Soon the room echoed with applause. Not just polite claps, but real ones. Real support. Not everyone joined, but enough did. And in that moment, Jaden didn't feel small. He felt strong. Later that night, at home, Tasha tucked him into bed. "You were brave tonight," she whispered. "I was scared." "Bravery is doing the right thing even when you are." Jaden nodded. Then he whispered, "Do you think Grandpa would have been proud?" Tasha smiled, tears in her eyes. "Oh, baby," she said, "he would have stood in that room beside you." It had been 3 days since the school meeting, but Jaden still felt the echoes. People were talking, not just at school, but online on the news and even in the neighborhood store. Some supported him. Some didn't. He was tired of being the boy from the plane. He just wanted to be Jaden again. But that quiet wish was broken by a knock at the door. The unexpected visitor. Tasha opened the door and froze. On the porch stood an older man with deep brown skin and gray hair under a veteran's cap. His hands were shaking just slightly, but his eyes were clear and sharp. "I'm looking for Tasha Montgomery," he said. "I'm Tasha," she replied carefully. "Can I help you?" He nodded slowly. "My name is Charles Duncan. I served with your father. He saved my life once, a long time ago. I think it's time your son knew who his grandfather really was." The box of secrets. Charles stepped inside and carefully placed an old wooden box on the table. Jaden came out of his room, curious. "This," Charles said, unlocking the box, "was meant for you one day. Your grandfather told me, if anything happens to me, find my family. Make sure they know I didn't stop fighting." Inside the box were medals, one for bravery, one for service, and one Jaden didn't recognize. It was shaped like a burning torch. "What's that one?" he asked, pointing. Charles looked at him with deep respect. "That's the Unity Flame. Only a few ever got it. It was given to soldiers who fought with their hearts, not just their weapons. Your grandfather earned it by protecting a group of children in a war zone. Risked his life to keep them safe." Jaden stared at the medal. It didn't shine like gold, but it felt heavier. Real. More than a soldier. As they flipped through the letters and old photos, Jaden saw something he had never known. His grandfather had marched with Dr. King. He taught at schools where kids weren't welcome because of their skin color. He had written poems. Some were sad. Some were hopeful. One was written the night Jaden was born. "A new star in the sky," it read. "He carries my blood, but I hope he walks freer than I ever did." Jaden clutched the poem tightly. His grandfather wasn't just a name on a grave. He was real, brave, kind, just like Jaden wanted to be. The warning. Before Charles left, he paused at the door. "I need to tell you something important," he said. "Ever since your story came out, people have started digging into the past. Your grandfather did some good things, but not everyone liked what he stood for." Tasha frowned. "What are you saying?" "I think someone doesn't want the truth out," Charles said quietly. 2 days ago, someone broke into my storage unit. Only took one box. The one with your grandfather's letters." Jaden felt a chill. Why would they do that? Charles looked serious. "Because sometimes the truth scares people more than lies ever could." The call from a reporter. Later that night, Tasha's phone buzzed again. It was a journalist. A kind one. She had spoken with them after the plane incident. But this time, her voice was urgent. "Tasha," she said, "I found something strange." "What?" "Records about your father's service. They are missing. I tried to access military archives. Sections of it have been scrubbed. That's not normal." Tasha's grip tightened. "Why would someone do that?" "I don't know yet," the reporter said. "But I think your father was involved in something bigger, something the government didn't want public. And your son, Jaden, is accidentally opening that door again." Jaden's nightmare. That night, Jaden had a dream. He stood in a huge hallway, with pictures of his grandfather lining the walls. But every time he tried to look closer, the pictures melted away, burned up by something invisible. He ran, trying to save them, but no matter how fast he moved, they kept vanishing. He woke up with a gasp. His mom rushed in. "It's okay," she whispered, holding him. It was just a dream. But Jaden wasn't so sure. It felt like a warning. Decision time. The next day, a local TV station called. They wanted to do a full story on Jaden and his grandfather's history. Tasha looked at her son. "This is your choice," she said gently. "If you want to step away from the spotlight, I'll protect that. But if you want to tell his story, I'll stand with you." Jaden looked down at the Unity Flame medal on the table. He thought about the poem, about the people clapping at the school, about the strangers who smiled when they saw him. Then he looked back up. "I want to tell this story," he said, "even if some people don't want to hear it." Jaden stood in front of the camera. Bright lights surrounded him, but he wasn't scared anymore. The medal sat on the table beside him. The picture of his grandfather in uniform stood proudly behind him. The interviewer gave a small nod. "We're living 5, 4, 3. Jaden took a deep breath. He was ready. "Jaden speaks. My name is Jaden Montgomery," he said calmly. "I'm 10 years old. A few weeks ago, I was on a plane, and someone thought I didn't belong there, just because I'm black." He paused. "At first, it hurt. A lot. But now, I understand. They didn't know me. They didn't know where I come from." He reached out and picked up the Unity Flame medal. "This belonged to my grandfather. His name was William Montgomery. He was a soldier, a teacher, a hero. And they tried to erase his name." The audience watching, at home, online, in airports, fell silent. "But you can't erase the truth forever," Jaden said. "You can't stop it from rising." The video goes viral. The interview spread fast. Social media exploded. #JadenSpeaks was trending around the world. People began sharing stories of their own grandparents, soldiers, freedom fighters, teachers who had once been forgotten. More shocking, former soldiers who had served with William Montgomery came forward. "He saved my life. He stood up when others stayed silent. He refused to follow an order that would have killed innocent people." One letter came from a retired general. It simply read, "He should have received the Medal of Honor. We failed him." The hidden file. The news team investigating Jaden's story received a strange tip, a flash drive left in an envelope at their station. It contained a secret government document, declassified only days ago. Inside was a full report on Operation Firelight, a mission gone wrong, a mission William Montgomery had tried to stop. He had refused to carry out orders that targeted civilians. He was threatened, silenced, and later sent to teach far away from the military. But his words, his actions were recorded. And now, those files were public. Jaden read them all. His grandfather hadn't just been brave. He had been right. A medal, too late. A few weeks later, Jaden and Tasha were invited to Washington, D.C. A quiet ceremony was held. A new medal was placed in Jaden's hands, this one bright gold, with stars around the edge. "For bravery beyond duty," the general said. He wasn't perfect, Jaden said in his short speech, but he stood up for what was right. "And now, I want to do the same." Back at school, Jaden returned to school like a quiet storm. The whispers were different now. "That's him, the brave kid." But Jaden didn't care about fame. He just wanted people to be kind to each other. A teacher pulled him aside one day and smiled. "You know, Jaden, you changed more than a school. You helped people remember who we're supposed to be." The woman on the plane. One day, months later, a letter arrived. It was from her, the woman on the plane. It read, "I watched your interview. I was wrong. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I'm sorry. You taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn." Jaden didn't reply. He didn't need to. Some lessons didn't need words, only change. Months passed. The story of Jaden Montgomery had become more than a headline. It had become a movement. Across the country, in schools across America, children watched Jaden's interview in classrooms. Some cried. Some sat quietly. Others raised their hands and asked, why did they treat him like that? And teachers finally started having the hard conversations about race, about kindness, about listening before judging. Posters began appearing in hallways. Character is greater than color. Courage speaks in silence. Be the reason someone feels seen today, all because of a quiet boy on a plane. The flight crew speaks out. The airline crew who had defended Jaden were invited on national TV. We didn't see a black kid, one flight attendant said. We saw a child. Alone, afraid, brave. When asked what made them act the way they did, the pilot answered simply, we remembered our humanity. Jaden's foundation. With the help of his aunt and a small group of teachers, Jaden started something new. The Montgomery Light Foundation. Its mission was clear: protect kids traveling alone. Offer help for children of fallen soldiers. Teach kindness in schools. People began donating. Veterans reached out to speak at schools. Families of forgotten heroes began sharing their stories. One small spark had lit a fire. Change in the government. Inspired by Jaden's story and the leaked files, several lawmakers opened investigations into old military records. A few weeks later, a list was published. Names of soldiers whose awards were delayed or denied for unfair reasons. Among them, William Montgomery, nominee, Medal of Honor. Congress held a vote. It passed. Jaden sat in the front row, holding his grandfather's photo as the medal was finally awarded posthumously. The president leaned down after the ceremony and whispered, you did something no one else could. You reminded us what truth looks like. Tasha's journey. Tasha, who had once struggled with a broken past, now worked full-time with the foundation. She gave talks about resilience, about healing, and about the power of standing up for the next generation. At one school, a little girl asked her, is Jaden really your nephew? Tasha smiled proudly. Yes, and he's braver than I'll ever be. Letters keep coming. Jaden continued to receive letters, hundreds of them, from kids, teachers, even strangers. One read, Dear Jaden, I was scared to tell my classmates I'm adopted, but after I saw your story, I told them the truth. And they didn't laugh. Thank you. Another said, my dad never talked about the war, but after we watched your story, he cried for the first time. He told us everything. Now I understand him more. The reunion. A quiet day came when Jaden and Tasha visited a retirement home for veterans. An old man sat in a wheelchair by the window. Tears welled up in his eyes when he saw Jaden. I served with your grandfather, he whispered. He saved my life. I've waited years to say thank you. Jaden held the man's hand tightly. You just did. The legacy lives on years past. Jaden grew older, taller, stronger, but he never forgot. He kept visiting schools. He kept the foundation alive. He helped more forgotten stories come to light. One morning, as he stood on a stage, now a young man, he ended his speech with the same words that started it all. My name is Jaden Montgomery, and I believe kindness is stronger than hate.